that to me were aunt and uncle, or they were my cousins, even though they really weren't my cousins. And then when I met my husband, he was actually adopted. So for me, it's kind of an all-around thing, because I met my husband when we were 15. So we've been together for forever. And so to me, it's just always been, my best friend is basically my sister. So family is more than just blood to me.
Oh, yeah. So, 15 years old. You know, I hate to say it, I'm going on 42 years being married to my current wife. I was married twice before that, folks. This one kind of stuck. And you know what? You know, when you're young, you think of weird things like sex all the time. And then, you know what? If you develop a good relationship, you know, you kind of think of other things. You become real close, you know, compatible friends. And I think that is more important, because you can have sex with somebody all the time and, you know, not have a relationship. It takes a long time, you know, to build up a friendship and companionship. And you started out young enough. Oh, yeah. Just a lot of people don't realize
you got to be
that.
able to be weird with them. You got to be able to have fun. Life's not worth it if you're not having fun and enjoying your time.
Well, you know, I was in 2 bad marriages. And I actually, one marriage, I was married to her, and then I divorced her. Then somehow she started talking to me again. We got married. The next morning I ran to my attorney and said, get it annulled. So actually I can say 3 marriages. But, you know, what happens in some relationships, and I know this is not about your books, but, you know, you get married and the other person wants to change you. And, you know, everybody has their own wants and desires and dreams. And a lot of people give that up when they get married. And that's because they don't have a good relationship. They don't have a good bond. So what your husband did for you, you know, he went out and bought you the notebooks, he bought you the pens and whatever, you know, to get you on it. That tells you that, you know, he really cares and wants to see you succeed in writing books. And not a lot of husbands would do it, because some husbands, I've heard it on the show, you know, and opposite were the men the same way. Their spouse was actually jealous when they said, hey, I want to write a book. And they wrote a book, and then, you know, they started getting a little bit famous from writing the book. And then, you know, all of a sudden the spouse is jealous over it. And there's no reason, because everybody has their own desires and wants.
Right. I got lucky. That's for sure.
Well, it sounds like it. Now, this book seems like it's like a more than a weekend read. Now, anything crazy in the book happen, or anything that you can divulge?
Well, there's definitely one part where her best friend growing up, the one that she thinks is the half-shifter, and he grew up in the human world too, she considers him her brother. All growing up, she considers him to be her brother no matter what. Well, when she finds her family, she finds out that she does have a brother. And there's definitely a big, I don't want to give away too much, but there's definitely something big going on there. It's towards the end of the book, but there's definitely a big surprise there. And there's definitely a big surprise with Nova herself, because she is a very, very special seeker. Eventually, we're going to have to figure out where that's going to lead her.
Well, it sounds like you're going to have to write more books in the series. Now, is this a self-published book, or is it published through a publisher, or how?
I go through an independent publisher. It's called Wild Dreams Publishing. They're actually out of Australia. But we are small, but we are a mighty little force.
Well, they contacted me about you, so, you know, that's, you know, what I hate is some publishers, I'll be honest with you. You know, I've been in broadcasting since 1976, and then I got out of it for a while and then went back into it. Now I was retired to a good friend of mine who passed away recently, Art Bell. I don't know if you know who he was, but he's the one that got me back into radio. And, you know, at the start, I had, you know, because a new show, I didn't have a huge listenership base like I do now. I wasn't really picky on some of the guests I had. I mean, a guest was a guest. That's how I looked at it. Well, that's not the case. And I had this one publicist contact me and said, hey, we have this person who wrote a book about zombies, and it's really good. And, and I kind of ignored it. And then they kept, sending me, emails about every week for like 2 months. You need to get him on your show. Well, I'll tell you exactly what happened. And I'm not saying the name of the guy or anything. I get him on the show, right? For 2 hour show. And, I asked him the name of the book. That was no problem. He told me the name of the book. And then I said, well, can we talk a little bit about the book? No, I don't want to talk about the book because that'll give any plots away. At that point, like you mentioned about being nervous coming on, and I said there's nothing to be about, being nervous. Well, when things like that happen to a host, right, you start freaking out like you wouldn't believe. Like you start sweating, you kind of like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I got 2 hours of, nothing here. And then I tried to get him to talk about the book, and he wouldn't do it. So then I just started remembering all, like, the Night of the Living Dead, the Dawn of the Living Dead, started talking about all these shows. I even talked about, the current, one on AMC, their TV series. I mean, I had to do something for 2 hours. And,
that had to be like pulling teeth.
But he wouldn't hardly talk. And the thing is, I thought I did a bad job, and I was like, send more cops, and it kind of got kind of silly, but you know what? The next week, I was getting flooded with emails from people saying that they really loved the show. And the bad part of the whole thing is I talked to him and I said, well, how many books have you sold? Now, okay, this is where you really have to watch it, where you get something published at, okay? Because there are some places that advertise on Facebook that say they can do, your books over the weekend and ship them to you. Self-published type of, and I'm not against self-published, but there's some of them that they're just out to milk the author or authors out there. It came down to, I said, well, how many books have you sold? And he goes, well, I sold 1 to my friend, and I sold 2 off of Amazon. I really, really panicked. Okay. And I then said, well, how long has the book been out? And he said, a year. How do you interview somebody like that, kid? It's almost impossible, let alone, if there's a guest in the paranormal of living hell, that was it that night. Because, I mean, I never freaked out. I never had a guest like that bad in my entire life. And then he couldn't figure out why nobody was buying his book. After we got off,
I don't know what it's about.
That's what I said. You can tell a little bit about it here, a little bit about the middle, and towards the end, a little bit. You don't have to give your plot away. But you didn't want to. You got on there and refused to talk anything about your book. Who's going to buy a book? When you don't talk about it.
That's crazy. I can't even imagine.
No, fans, I wouldn't spend $19.95 off of Amazon to buy a book that he's only sold 3 in a year. I mean, that's a dead giveaway. Something's wrong.
Got to at least have a couple good reviews on there to know that people like it, and you got to know what it's about, and that's just crazy.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the type of things I go through. So that's where I get nervous. But, okay, so you got this book you wrote, and it's out, and where can they find it?
It is out. We are on Amazon, which I have 2 available platforms. There's the Kindle option, which is $2.99, so I'm not going out there breaking the bank for it. And we also have the paperback version, which is $15.99. It can also be found on my website, which is kaegalla.com. As well as our publishing house website, which is the Wild Dreams Publishing.
So they can buy it off of Wild Dreams Publishing. They can buy it, then I take it from Facebook. And they
Yeah.
can also go on to your website and buy it. Now, what is your website?
My website is Kae Galla, KaeGalla.com. And also, super exciting news, we found out that hopefully by the end of the year, if not early next year, there's a few bookstores that are going to be having Starburst in there as well.
Well, maybe after the show, there might be a few more, you know?
Let's hope so.
Yeah, it sounds like an interesting, a book and stuff like that. And again, how long did it actually take you from the day your husband came home with those pens and notebooks that day to you completed the first?
It took about a year before I sent it for me to write it all out, type it out, and hit the send button to my editors. About a year. And then after it goes through the editing, that's kind of quick from there. So just a few months after that.
So
a little over a year.
So how's your husband feel about you writing the book? Is he really proud?
Yes. Yes, he's definitely very proud. And he's always like, are you going to write some more? Whenever I come home and we've got our things done. And he's like, are you going to write some more? And we have it set up downstairs in our little office area. We have the desks set up so they're kind of an L shape.
Uh-huh.
So he'll sit at his computer and I'll sit at my computer and he'll play video games or work on whatever he's working on. And then I'll sit and type, and we're doing things together even though I'm not into video games and he's not into writing or reading. So we have completely opposite interests, but we're still together doing them together. So it's kind of nice.
Well, that's good. I mean, it'd be really bad in a marriage, honestly, if you were into video games, he was into video games, and you guys were, that's what I find interesting in my relationship going on 42 years is, my wife has totally, people look at us and they go, wow, you have nothing really in common. And I said, what do you mean we have nothing in common? We're great friends. I mean, do I have to enjoy her going, looking at antique shops and thrift stores for bringing home something? I go, oh my God, what did you? I'd keep my mouth shut because it makes her happy, And then she, is happy when I lock myself into my studio and do the show, and or if I go on my. In fact, she really likes it when I go on a motorcycle trip and I'm gone for a few days. She loves that too.
Well, they say opposites attract, so. I mean, there's got to be something to that. If, we all have our different things, but we can still come together.
Well, I know my first marriage of 2.5 years, we had a lot of things in common, and it didn't save the marriage. It was just, after the one thing kind of wore out, it just was nothing there. I mean, no friendship, no nothing. And that's what's important. So I'm really happy that you and your husband, since you were 15 years old, got together and, and just think when you hit 40 some years and 50 years of marriage, Yeah.
We had the realization on our anniversary from our first date that we have been together longer than we haven't been together because I'm 31 now. So 16 years together and 15 not. It was kind of entertaining when we realized that.
Oh, yeah. Do you have any children or anything?
No, we have 3 cats. They're our fur babies.
Ah, yeah,
They like to help write.
Cats are interesting. My first set of 3 cats all passed on. It's funny, when they died, they kind of died within a month of each other. And they were, pushing maybe 15, 16 years old. But, it was interesting. They were part of the family. They were always looking at things that I couldn't see. That's, sometimes I think in the paranormal, like when my daughter, was, when she was 5 years old, was in Poltergeist, that movie. And she would, we had it on VHS, and every day she would watch it. She would, watch it before she went to school, watch it when she came home from school. And then, she'd be talking to her imaginary friends. And it was funny, the cats, all 3 of them in the front room, would be looking at a same, they'd be in different spots, but they'd be looking in the same general area, like there was somebody there. And that's, when after I started talking